We've ranked every version of Jason Voorhees, we've ranked each one of his movies. The only logical progression here now is to turn our attention to those nuisancey nemesis of his. So in this video, I'm going to rank all 12 Friday the 13th final girls from the worst all the way to the best. Happy Friday the 13th Scream Team, Zach Cherry here, and if you're as obsessed with horror movies as I am, you might want to consider hitting that subscribe button and turning on those bell notifications, setting them to all. That way you can stay up to date with all my latest content. For this video, I'm not choosing the rank based on any specific criteria as much as I'm just going off of who I think did the best job as each film's protagonist. And to be completely honest, there are only 4 characters I really like, as the rest I could care less about. So if your favorite happens to fall in the back half of this arbitrary order I've decided on, you should totally take that as a personal insult to yourself and your beliefs, and tell me in excruciating detail in the comment section how I ruined your day. Oh, how I live for your pain. For everyone else, I don't know, I guess just give it a thumbs up and let me know what your rankings are. Let's get this party started. In last place is Jessica Kimmell from Jason Goes to Hell. Introduced 9 films into the franchise as the niece of Jason Voorhees, who we never even knew existed, not a lot is known about this character, other than the fact that she left town for undisclosed reasons before giving birth to Stephen Freeman's daughter. She returns, however, after receiving news of her mother's murder, bringing along the baby and her slimy tabloid journalist boyfriend Robert. Where things happen, it isn't exactly clear, but we find out that she alone possesses the mystical powers needed to destroy Jason. Okay, so first of all, this is a character who's introduced 40 minutes into an 87-minute long movie, so we already don't get a lot of screen time with her, and there's already more established characters introduced before her, like her mother Diana, or even Vicky, the redheaded waitress, who probably would have made a more suitable final girl than Jessica when her boyfriend, who is possessed by Jason, comes and attacks her in the house and literally tries to kill her. Her first inclination is to throw Stephen out of the car, who's clearly come and rescued her. So it just kind of makes her really irrational and a liability to have in any situation where you're fending off a brutal serial killer who's now possessing other people that you know. She's also not a very responsible mother. We see her leave her baby in the care of Vicky the waitress, knowing full well that she's got to go into work, where they then put the baby in the crate in the back of the diner. And all she's doing at home is having a cry shower. Even after, when Stephen is getting pulled underground by those hell demons or whatever they are, she just sits there and watches him for 20 seconds before she's just like, oh, I guess I'll help you out. Ultimately, it just comes down to the fact that Jessica is a horrible mother and daughter and ex-girlfriend. Also, just the vibe that she gives off, she just seems like a very selfish person. I mean, we don't really know what the backstory is between her and Stephen, but clearly she left town. This guy's never met his baby daughter, and we don't really get a reason for any of that, so she's just kind of an asshole. In 11th place is Rennie Wickham from Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Raised by her controlling uncle after the death of her parents in an accident, Rennie believed to have had an encounter with Jason during a swimming lesson in Crystal Lake when she was 13, which plagued her with psychedelic hallucinations and a crippling fear of the water. Upon graduating high school, she and her classmates organize a ship-bound trip to New York City, where Jason stows away on the vessel, murdering everyone except for her and a few others, at which point he then pursues them to the metropolis, where they take in all the major sights, like a junkie-infested shipyard and a sewer full of toxic waste. The biggest problem I have with Rennie is that she has absolutely zero personality. It's just really, really boring and dull to watch. She actually acts throughout the movie as if she has already been shot up with meth from the beginning. She's just kind of sleepwalking, that vacant, drugged expression in her face. And then it isn't until the end of the movie, when she actually does get shot up with meth, that she finally gets some energy and starts doing crazy shit. I don't know how meth works. I also really don't like her boyfriend, equally as annoying and whiny as she is. So it was kind of a letdown that these are the 2 characters who end up surviving in the end. I could go on in a whole other video of just ranking the final boys of this franchise. He would be really low, I can just tell you that much. Also, I just don't buy the whole timeline of her getting pulled under the water by Jason. I don't think that ever happened. She made that up. I think that she has some sort of personality disorder, because it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up with the timeline in any way whatsoever. But the thing that irks me the most is the fact that after she is shot up with meth, she's so reckless to the point where she would get in that car with the rest of the survivors and drive it into a wall. She literally killed Mrs. Van Dusen. Like, that's on her. And then after the car blows up, she doesn't show any remorse or face consequences for her actions. She actually deflects it back on her uncle because he threw her in the lake a few years ago. Like, he was giving you a swimming lesson. In 10th place is Rowan LaFontaine from Jason X. The scientific project leader at a high-security government testing facility, Rowan was tasked with running experiments on the recently captured Jason Voorhees, where she believed the only way to stop him for good was to cryogenically freeze him. After Jason escapes, she's able to lure him into the cryonic chamber, but is locked in the room in the process, where the two aren't discovered until the year 2455, when Earth has become a desolate wasteland, forcing the human race to find life on a new planet. After becoming reanimated, she leads the charge to destroy the thawed-out Jason as he continues his reign of terror in the vast expanse of outer space. I don't necessarily have any beef with Rowan. I think the problem with her is that, I mean, first of all, I had to look up that her name was Rowan because that's something that I usually forget, but she's just one of the characters in this movie that completely blends in with everyone else. She just disappears into the background, and that is not a good look for a final girl in any horror movie. We literally don't know anything about this character. She has very little depth or backstory. She finds out that she's been frozen for 455 years and barely reacts to it. Like, I would be pretty sad all the people that you knew are dead. I mean, I know they were trying to display some level of badassery, but it just does not reflect in the movie at all. Like, she doesn't even have any moment where she's facing off against him, or like, really, she doesn't do anything to stop him. She's always just in group situations with everyone and kind of backed into a corner. But apparently, she's the expert on Jason Voorhees because one of the characters said she was. In 9th place is Megan Garris from Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. The rebellious back-talking daughter of the local sheriff, Megan was one of 4 counselors working at the newly reopened Camp Crystal Lake, now called Forest Green, when she met and developed a crush on Tommy Jarvis, who enlisted her help in defeating Jason after his corpse became reanimated from a rogue lightning bolt. With Tommy left unconscious after his battle with Jason, Megan delivers the final blow when she uses a boat motor to hack into the killer's neck while he's chained to the bottom of the lake. This was the point in the franchise where we kind of saw the downfall of the final girl, because it kind of established the final couple moving forward. I know there's instances in the movies before this where there are more than one survivor, but this is the one that really established that trope, and I don't really like it. I'd rather there just be one sole survivor. But the problem with Megan specifically is that she just does not have that final girl energy at all. She just has this giddy, frivolous attitude throughout the movie, which is her only personality note. I don't even feel like at any point in the movie she realizes that she's in a horror movie until the very end when she like starts finding the bodies, which I mean is common. You know, like Laurie Strode didn't go through all of Halloween thinking that she was in a horror movie. But the thing with Megan is that there were all these people around her telling her she was in a horror movie, and it was all like a big joke to her. It's also very irresponsible that she is assisting Tommy in this crusade for the only reason that she's attracted to him, when for all she knows, he could be a serial killer. I mean, that was a possibility that was presented to her. I get it, Megan. Tom Matthews is cute and all, but you gotta be smart. And also, they have no chemistry at all. I don't care what anyone says. This is just not a character with any agency of her own. There's no motivation for her to be doing anything that she's doing throughout this movie. And then at the end, this was Tommy and Jason's fight, but then she gets to go in and finish it. Like, she did not earn that. And it pisses me off that she was awarded that she got to swoop in there and be the one to kill Jason and save Tommy. No, it just didn't make any sense to me. In 8th place is Chris Higgins from Friday the 13th Part 3. A college student vacationing at her family's summer home with a group of friends, Chris was reluctant to return to Crystal Lake after having survived an attack by Jason several summers earlier. Once she arrives, she begins seeing Jason everywhere, which she believes is all in her imagination, and takes off with her boyfriend Rick, only to return to the cabin later that night to find everybody dead. With nowhere to run, Chris is forced to face her attacker head on, leaving her in a state of hysteria by the time she's found by the police the following morning. I stand by the opinion that I do not think Chris should have been the final girl in this movie. It should have been Vera, who was just shown to be a much more likable character, who, I mean, I even got more of a sense of personality out of her. I don't want this to seem like it's a knock against Dana Kimmell, but her performance as Chris is the most wooden out of anyone on this list. I always get the sense from her that this is a character that belongs on a sitcom just because of the way that she delivers her lines. It's almost like she's waiting for a laugh track afterwards. And she has this thing where she has no internal monologue, so she'll like be like, I don't remember leaving that door open. Or my favorite, when she comes back to the cabin and I guess like water is dripping down from upstairs, but it looks like she walked into a spider web. I will say though that there is a certain level of camp to this character that I do appreciate. I don't think that, you know, it's great. It doesn't hold a candle to Nancy or a Sydney. She definitely belongs on the lower tier of this list. And I also feel like she just didn't really do anything to earn the title of being the final girl. Like, she just was the final girl because she was the only one left. Like, there was no one else. In 7th place is Whitney Miller from the Friday the 13th remake. Constantly tending to the aid of her dying mother, Whitney was encouraged to spend some time away with her friends after the stress at home had caused a rift between her and her brother Clay. While on a camping trip, she's abducted by Jason, who holds her captive in his hideout beneath Camp Crystal Lake for 6 long weeks, inciting Clay to launch a one-man search and rescue mission, where upon finding her, the two siblings band together in order to end Jason's relentless killing spree. I guess the biggest problem with this character is the fact that she's not really the final girl. We have the other girl who's basically carrying the film for her, with Clay as well, until when they finally do find Whitney and then it's time for her to go, that Whitney gets to take over. So it's almost like a cheat. There's also the fact that she survives as long as she does, just kind of based on pure happenstance, because her boyfriend finds a locket with a face of Pamela Voorhees, who just happens to look like her, and this saves her life. It's pretty dumb. And also, depending on what cut of the film you're watching, there's a different story of her as a hostage. As in one scenario, she's just kind of in that cellar the whole time, but in another, she actually does manage to escape, but then she just gets recaptured again, so it's kind of just a moot point. But I do place her a little higher because at least we know something about this character. We learn about her backstory, and we learn about her through Clay. Like, at least we know that there are other characters in the movie who care about her, so that at least tells us that we should care about her. Considering the fact that this is a franchise where there are Rennies and Jessicas, I'm completely fine putting her here. In 6th place is Laurie Campbell from Freddy vs. Jason. Having watched her mother get murdered by Freddy Krueger when she was younger, Laurie was lied to by her father and the authorities in an attempt to keep the Nightmare Killer's name out of the minds of Springwood teenagers, thus rendering him powerless to enter their dreams. However, Freddy, figuring out a way to make them believe in him again, lures Jason Voorhees to town in hopes that the wake of death will trigger their memories, only to cause more problems instead as he just becomes jealous of Jason's kill count. Caught in the middle of the turf war, Laurie devises her own plan to defeat them both and pulls Freddy out of the dream world where the two killers face off against one another in a battle that's been 10 years in the making. If you have seen the other videos I've done on this franchise, you know that I'm not actually a fan of Freddy vs. Jason, especially because of the characters. I find them all to be very unlikable and annoying. So to justify this, I will say that I have come around to her a bit lately. I think if there are things that annoy me about Laurie, it's the extreme histrionics. It's also the fact that I don't think she has her priorities in order at all. For instance, she sees someone get murdered in her house and goes to school the next day, which I mean is all well and good, but then she faints at school. She's basically passed out in the nurse's office, and then the next time we see her, she's at a rave and she's just like vibing away. And then her other friend gets killed, and her first inclination after that is to just kind of like hang out with this dude who she hasn't seen in 3 years. It's all very ridiculous, but she does get more practical as the movie goes on. As we see towards the end, she becomes very impassioned about getting rid of Freddy. This is also a character whose story I remember, so I'm gonna rank her a little higher for that. Also, I have an appreciation for Monica Keena, because I've seen her do interviews about this movie, and she is definitely in on the joke. She seems to have a good sense of humor about it, so I like that about her too. In 5th place is Pam Roberts from Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. As the assistant director of the Pinehurst Youth Development Center, Pam welcomed Tommy Jarvis to the halfway house, where she served as a compassionate leader who devoted her time to rehabilitating troubled teens. Amidst a series of mysterious murders around town, she takes young Reggie to visit his older brother one night, where upon her return to the home, discovers that everyone is dead. Becoming very protective of the surviving kids, she defends them against the psychotic Roy Burns until he's finally struck down by Tommy, who machetes him out of a hayloft onto some pointy farm farm equipment. I don't really have a lot to say about this character, to be honest. She's just kind of there. She is unique in the fact that she is a little bit older than most of the characters who we've seen before this, and even after going into the franchise later on. But at the same time, it's almost like if she was played by an older actress, she probably wouldn't have been the final girl, because I do see her as a character who's more similar to like the Mrs. Van Dusens or the Tina's moms. She's also one of 3 people to survive this movie, so that does kind of take away from her final girl card a little bit, but I like her because she's just a really like nice, caring, and protective person. Like, she's looking out for the well-being of the kids in the home and Tommy and Reggie. I definitely would have liked to know more about this character. I'm not really sure that there's anything they could have done with her though, as it seemed like she only really survived the movie because they needed a female character to be alive at the end. In 4th place is Tina Shepard from Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Essentially the Carrie White of Crystal Lake, Tina possesses telekinetic powers, which caused her to drown her father when she was younger. Returning to the lake several years later with her mother and psychiatrist as part of her therapy, she accidentally resurrects Jason, which sends him on yet another murder spree. With no one else capable of taking him down, Tina's forced to gain control of her emotions, where she's able to harness her powers and use them to defeat the killer corpse, returning him right back from whence he came. Now we're starting to get to the characters I like, because everyone from this point on is pretty solid. Tina is presented to us as an outsider, so I already like her for that because I am a champion of the underdog. Even though her and her storyline are extremely melodramatic, I'm still okay with it because we do get a sense of who this character is and what her life was before the movie, and she's also just a really worthy opponent to Jason. I think she spends more time fighting against him than running away from him, which is pretty rare for anyone in this franchise. It just kind of sucks that the only way she was able to defeat him was by summoning her dead father to come up all mucky and whatever and pull him underneath the water. But I mean, she is still just 4th. In 3rd place is OG final girl Alice Hardy from Friday the 13th. An aspiring artist from California, Alice temporarily abandoned her life to come to the East Coast, where she met and became involved with Steve Christie, who hired her to work at Camp Crystal Lake for the summer. Despite feeling uncomfortable around him and wanting to return home to resolve her past issues, she agrees to stay a little longer, at which point Pamela Voorhees, a former employee of Steve's family, suffers a psychotic breakdown and goes on a killing spree of the entire campground in order to avenge the death of her son Jason, who had previously drowned in the lake due to negligent counselors. As the staff get picked off one by one, Alice becomes the last one standing, where she faces off against the mad matriarch and decapitates her with her own machete. I absolutely adore Adrienne King. I think most of the actors in this franchise probably look down on the time they played a character in a Friday the 13th film, but Adrienne has fully embraced it. There's a certain subtlety about her performance. I think she's one of those actresses who's just very expressive without saying all that much, as we do see there's an extended scene in the movie as she's the only one alive for like 5 minutes or more and just carrying the tension of that moment for the entire time. I do get a little annoyed by all the time she spends running away from the killer, especially when she's already subdued Mrs. Voorhees so many times. Like, at that point, you gotta just tie her up or kill her. So it becomes very frustrating when she keeps running away and then is surprised that she comes back and tries to kill her again. But she does eventually get fed up and hacks off Mrs. Voorhees' head, so I guess we all have our breaking point. She's also got a little bit of an edge to her, as, you know, we do see her smoking weed and playing strip Monopoly, which was kind of against type for the final girl at the time. So, you know, she wasn't about following trends, she was doing her own thing. And I mean, I know this is unfair, but she was also the first Friday final girl, so that does count for something, especially when you see how terrible they got later on. In 2nd place is Trish Jarvis from Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. With her parents having recently separated, Trish and her younger brother Tommy went to live with their mother on Crystal Lake, where she had been hopeful that her family would eventually resolve their issues and get back together. However, after the disappearance of Jason's body from the local morgue, she meets a backpacker who warns her of Jason's imminent arrival, but it's too little too late, as Jason has already killed her mother and a group of partying teens who had rented out the house next door. Armed with a machete, Trish does everything she can to physically protect her little brother, while Tommy himself taps into Jason's traumatic past as a way to emotionally manipulate him. In the end, the sibling duo are able to survive the horror, but with lasting psychological repercussions that will likely haunt them for years. What I like about Trish, and I find really resonates with me, is the fact that she is a very protective older sister to Tommy. And it's not just out of circumstance because their mother is missing or dead, it's actually something that's pre-established. I think that if you can have a final girl and surround her with a support system that either pulls or pushes her in different directions, you've already got a much more well-defined and well-written character, which just makes for a much more interesting movie. Trish also just gives it. Like, this is good final girl energy. She's jumping out of windows, she's chopping through hands. This is the kind of action we want to see in our heroine. Of course, Tommy is the one who killed Jason, but Trish assisted him, so it was a team effort. And when you consider someone like Jessica, who's basically just there for herself, it makes the victory much less gratifying. Whereas here, this was completely earned by the Jarvis kids, and there's a reason for that, and a reason why this is my favorite movie of the franchise. And finally, winner winner chicken dinner is going to be Ginny Field from Friday the 13th Part 2. An aspiring child psychologist, Ginny was hired by her boyfriend Paul Holt to be his assistant at Packanack Lodge, where he ran a counselor training camp across the lake from where the original massacre had taken place. In order to keep his staff and trainees away from the condemned property, Paul scares them with a campfire tale of Jason Voorhees, causing Ginny to become fixated on the legend, where she empathizes with the orphan child for having watched his mother get killed. After spending the night out, she and Paul return to the lodge to find everyone dead, where Jason attacks them and gives chase, leading her to his rundown shack in the woods where she finds a shrine of his mother's decapitated head. From there, Ginny adorns Mrs. Voorhees' sweater, which she uses to trick Jason into momentarily lowering his guard, allowing her and Paul enough time to gain the upper hand and defeat the sack-headed serial killer. Ginny is not only my favorite final girl of this franchise, but actually one of my favorite final girls ever, because she embodies all those important traits, like being smart and funny and sassy and empathetic and vulnerable. But she's also not overwhelmingly any one of those traits. She's kind of a balance of all of them together. I also take into account Amy Steele's natural charisma, which totally transcends this character as well. I think that if this was played by any other actress, they probably wouldn't capture Ginny for who she is. It definitely takes a very specific person to play a role like this, and she just falls into it very comfortably. I also want to point out that she was the first one to manipulate Jason before anyone else did it, and I also fully believe that she would have been able to take care of herself without Paul coming in to rescue her at the end. But in defense of Paul, I actually like these two characters together, so it works for me here. Anyway, that's my ranking, at least based on my current feelings. If you guys want to see even more Friday the 13th related content, my channel's got tons of it. You can check out these ranking videos right now. Until next time, I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.